What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another week of the Bestial Frenzies podcast. I'm here with my Bestial Frenzy, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm here with my Bestial Frenzy, Theo.
Whoa! Holy crap! Big week. Big week again. Another big week, right?
Yeah, it's a huge week. All of FTC has been spoiled.
FTC Fracture Crown, the whole set, all 90 cards. We have all of them. And so we figured, now that we have the whole set, we can look at all the cards and compare them directly against each other, that we would just kind of do a full set review. Just kind of go through every single card, give a brief description of how good we think, how impactful it's going to be, and then we'll see if our predictions are right.
Yeah, we will definitely see, because on some of these we're definitely going to be wrong, and some of these we're
Yeah,
definitely going to be wrong.
I think I'm really excited to, whenever set 3 drops and we've had like a full season of worth of set 2, to go back through our ratings and be like, what were we right about, what were we wrong about, and how bad was it? But I got a pretty good feeling about most of these cards, so let's jump right over into it. All right, we've got our set review here. So starting off, we've got Spirit of Serene Fire. So we got the Serene Spirits first. The Glim 6, Draw 6. I think we got these at 9 out of 10s. But is that how do you feel about that?
I think we have every single one at 9 out of 10. I think every one of these cards is very good. It'll fill its niche where it needs to be. Like, I just can't ever see these cards not being not necessarily meta warping, but I think they're going to be very impactful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think all 3 of these ones is just like in the decks that really want it, they'll love it. The decks that don't care about it, they don't care about it. It's not going to be broken, but it's just a solid card. Off the top of your head, what decks off the top of your head are you thinking might choose to play the Draw 6 Spirits rather than the old fashioned?
I think a lot of combo or even burn might want it, just because if you can find the cards you want for especially in game 2 and game 3, the specific matchup you're going into, I think it's just really good for main board sideboarding stuff. And with combo, with Erupting Rhapsody, you're getting so much card advantage, and you're only really looking for one of your melodies or harmonies, whichever one not Ember Song is.
Yeah, Erupting is the hard
not Erupting Rhapsody. Sorry, I'm not saying Erupting Rhapsody is going to be a great deck, but on something like that where your combo is dependent on 2 cards, you can glimpse 6, and if you don't see one, you just send all 6 to the bottom, and you basically just drew 6 cards.
Yeah, the other big one that I was thinking is maybe heavy advanced element decks that are I really need a dungeon guide as part of my game plan. If you're if you see one in your top 6, you're like, great, cool, I'm chilling. But other than that, yeah, no, I think these are really solid cards, and so the same explanation is going to be for water and for wind. I think they're all they're very good in the decks that want them, and that's great.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're all going to see a pretty solid amount of play.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving on. Number 4, we got the new Merlin level 3. So we've put her at an 8 out of 10. I mean, it's a very good rating. She's a very, very good card. I think, personally, the biggest, advantage that this card has is the fact that it is Crux Element. I think that is the biggest thing going for it.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Crux Element, and then I think a lot of it's just secondary. Getting your extra levels, I think is really strong, especially if you're, on some of those more control-y Crux game plans that we're going to see evolve with set 2. And the ability to just draw extra cards a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, she definitely leans into control, I think, a lot. And every other turn, getting extra card draw is really nice. The extra levels are nice if you consider things like Mind Freeze, any stuff like that that's level dependent, any efficiency spells that she might run because she's still a mage. I think she's a very, very fine card, yeah.
No, I think she will probably replace, because a lot of the other Lorraines right now are very, I don't want to say combo heavy, but I feel the one Crux Knight where you get +1 attack for every card in your band, for every regalia weapon in your banishment. I think that gets a lot worse because Soul gets a lot worse this set, and I think the other one's just fine. But if you have the idea, you're just drawing a bunch of cards, who cares? It's a little bit of a different game plan too because you have to go to Merlin from level 2 instead of Lorraine. But I think with the whole format slowing down, like, who really cares?
Yeah, for sure. I think that'll definitely be like an interesting split off of like what warrior decks look like just in Lorraine or not, sorry, in Merlin. So I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Very solid card though. All right, up next we've got Azure Protective Trinket. So this is the one that banishes fire element cards from a graveyard, and we've got it sitting at a 7 out of 10. And I think that's pretty fair. I think like of the trinkets that were revealed, this was like the kind of the lowest in power, because it very specifically hits certain cards rather than certain decks. And
Hmm.
so it's like it might still see play if your deck is like particularly weak to like Rending Flames, for instance. You might be like, okay, like this is probably a good sideboard card. I don't know. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we give it a 7 out of 10 strictly because what it is good against is extremely good against. Extremely good against erupting, is extremely good against branding, extremely good against fire momentum. And the decks that like play those cards, perma banishing 3 instead of just like nullifying lantern, it's a lot different. Perma banishing 3 is enough to maybe just win the game. Maybe you don't want to play raccoon. Uh, we might actually have this one a little high with all the hate. Maybe this card doesn't see any play, but if you're afraid of fire and fire gets really good, I think this sees a slot in your sideboard at least.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. I also think like depending on what the other fire decks look like, even if they're not specifically playing into like rending or erupting or something, if there are decks that run heavy fire element floating memory, this could
True.
potentially hit 3 floating. Like that's a lot. So like it's very specific. Its uses are pretty niche, but in those niche cases, it is very good at what it does. So I think because of that, we have it still pretty high at a 7 overall.
Yeah.
Up next, Crimson Protective Trinket. So this is the one that banishes wind cards from memory. We put this one at 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think this one again it gets an 8 out of 10 because the situations it's good in, it's absolutely broken it. Like
Mhm.
being able to, it does cost 1, which is something, but if you can get 2 cards out of your opponent's memory, that's that's insane. Like the card advantage in this game is absolutely incredible, and banishing 2 at random is really strong. And you have to play it smart because maybe they put a bunch of norm or maybe they put some advanced elements in, but I think this card makes playing like level 2 decks, like Win Lorraine, extremely prohibitive because this card by itself, even banishing 1 card from a rush deck, is like a 1 for 1 for you. A 1 for 1 for you. God, so many fours is like really incredible.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about the way this plays into wind decks, right, is that a lot of them are stacking their memories with wind cards anyways to get advantage out of like Veiling Breeze and Wind Cutter and stuff like that. Like they're putting wind cards into their memory so that they get their bonus effects, and so it's more likely for you to hit those wind cards and then rip them out of their hand permanently, which is very good. Hand removal is like really powerful in this game, which is why there's not a lot of it.
Yeah. And it is a risk, but I think against a lot of matchups, like I said, a 1 for 1 is still very, very good, even if it costs you materialization.
Yep. All right, up to number 7, we got the Divine Relic, Quicksilver Grail. So off the
Yeah,
bat, we put this one at an 8 out of 10. I think that off the bat, that still might even be a little generous, honestly.
hmm
Um, just because at the moment the use of this card, like the use cases are pretty niche. Um, like the first ones that pop to mind for me are like using it to get a nullifying lantern like during your opponent's combo turn, using it to get a proclamation tithe during your opponent's combo turn. Uh, and then there's like a couple other like potential uses, like with a poison dagger. You could get poison dagger in a place where they can't get rid of it on their turn, and then bring it in at the end of their turn, so it's safer. Like it's pretty niche, but I think the situations it's good in, it's pretty good in. So I think for that reason and that reason alone, we give it an 8. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. Like it's kind of niche, but the situations it's good in is just like so fantastic. And like this card by itself really, really hurts like Turbo Rye, and it really hurts, like Erupting Rhapsody and stuff. Like in, it can even be like there's probably some mind games here where maybe you put something under this that your opponent doesn't expect to come under this.
True.
Like maybe against Lorraine, you put a Nullifying Lantern. So when they go to Crux site, you're just like, there's no Crux in their
Yep.
memory
No
or
target.
in
No
their
target.
graveyard.
Yeah. One thing
Instead
that
of
I
like
was
completing their draw.
yeah, one thing that I was thinking about for this is it's a neat way for Fire Lorraine to play their own lantern without having the negative effects of lantern, since they already have drawn blades, so they're like, I don't really need GCR as much. That you can like effectively have a lantern in play when you need it without actually like giving yourself the downsides. So like there's still some like good uses for it, for sure. I just think competing with GCR is a really tough spot to compete with.
Yeah, I think as the game gets slower, like if we expect this game to continue getting slower, I think GCR's power level gets like a little bit diminished because drawing a card in a 5-turn game versus drawing a card in a 9-turn game is very different.
True.
And I think that's where this card could absolutely shine.
Yeah. Wholly agree. Moving on, we've got Tariff Ring. So this is our first like pretty low rated card that we've got, and this one's up at a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, the reason I don't like this card a lot is against Rush. I think you already have enough pieces to where who really cares? And when you're going against Rush, a lot of the times they don't have as few cards in their hand as you might expect them to. Because it's not like in like Magic the Gathering where they need to play land, play a creature, play a land, play a creature, all that stuff. So they're losing 2 cards a turn. They're only losing cards when they actually like play a creature or play a burn spell and stuff like that. So like they generally still have like 5, 6 cards in their hand, and if you have to banish this card during your opponent's recollection, they're still just going to attack you with what they have instead of playing another card down.
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing for this one for me is just that like you have to do it during the recollection phase. So like you don't get to really play the mind games. Like if you're going to use it, they know you're using it at the beginning of the turn. So like, you know, there's that. It costs some materialization for an effect that kind of already exists. I mean, not like exactly exists, but like taxing attacks and making like individual attacks harder to do. Like we already have plenty of cards that kind of counter that gameplay, especially coming in this set. So I think using a materialization for this is kind of a weak use of that. So
I just think we already got enough to deal with ally stuff where this is going to be not the like because it doesn't actually answer anything. Like you're still probably taking 2 hits this turn.
yeah,
I just don't think it's enough.
yep, I agree. I agree. Up next, we got Tithe Proclamation, our first 10 out of 10. I think this card is absolutely incredible.
I agree. That's why we gave it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, so the one cost on enter draw card, so it replaces itself if you random banish. It gives you, effectively +1 if you use floating for it, which is nice. And then, not allowing people to draw more than 3 cards each turn is a very strong effect when the most powerful decks in the game are ones that like to spam draw spells.
Mhm.
You've got, I mean, like I'm specifically thinking of like the Ascension Loop Lorraines and the combo Rye builds, right, where they're just like draw a bunch of cards, draw a bunch of cards, draw a bunch of cards, and then they have this like 15 card hand. And there's like I win. This card is so good at countering that style of gameplay, which means that certain decks, like I think Water Xander specifically, is like I can't keep up with some of these decks that just draw a billion cards and win all in one turn. Now I can because I can sort of limit their power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think again, you just gotta you explained it super well. Like it replaces itself and it just stops a decks that have oppressive strategies by drawing a lot of cards. It makes them have to have answers too.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes you have to play like Zephyr or something on your combo off turn, which might just be too hard to do, or you need to play Fracturize, or you need to play, Spurn to Ash. But if your opponent's comboing off, you can kind of play some mind games with quick, with Divine Relic, and just have some fun with it. I think this card's fantastic. I think you're probably going to see this in most every deck that isn't a combo deck itself, and you might even see it in there.
Yeah, true. I mean, that could just be like the key to the mirror is they're like, I'm gonna hit you with this, and then like I can still play under it, but you can't. Is is a possibility. Up next, we've got Viridian Protective Trinket. This is another high rated card. So this is the one that taxes water elements. And I think, yeah, I mean, water's entire game plan is to react to what you're doing, play cards on your turn. So if you're taxing them on your own turn, it's just pretty good value.
Yeah, and this card did have an errata where you don't actually need to banish it. It's just permanently while this is on the field, when your opponent tries to activate water element cards during your turn, they cost an extra two. So the card's a lot better with the errata for sure, and they're going to have a promo to kind of replace that. I think we mentioned that last time, but
Yep.
I think this gets a 9 out of 10 just because when it is good against, it is extremely good against.
Yeah, it's
It's
incredibly
not that
effective.
like this is meta breaking all this stuff. No, it's just like a fracturize costing two extra, or their counter spell costing two extra. It's so much, or a shrouded mist costing seven.
Right, yeah, yeah. I think it's very good, especially considering some of the very powerful like fast spells that water got this set too. It's like if there's going to be a lot of water, I think, especially right out of the works, and so I think actually right at the beginning of the format, people might be maining this just because I think a lot of people are going to be testing water decks. And so just taxing them on your turn is kind of all you really want to do. So it's
And
great.
this could
It's
have
great value for that.
like if the meta is 50% water, I could absolutely see you dedicating a main board slot to this just because in 50% of your matchups, this card you want in game one, and it's pivotal in game one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, up next we've got Beast Soul Visage. So we covered this one a little bit last week just because it was newly spoiled a week ago. Uh, it's okay. We have it at 7 out of 10. It's still pretty good at what it does. It gives a unique effect, which is really nice. I just don't know, like I don't know how relevant that is. Like plus two damage, Pride 3, make him a beast. It's
I,
it's interesting.
I think this is a card when it finds a home, it's going to be extremely good at it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's also kind of good against other like it's kind of good against burn decks if that's a slot in this format just by being able to turn an ally into a pride 3 one of your opponent's allies.
hmm
So the
Yeah,
fact that this can possibly be a zero cost regalia that's a removal, I think that's strong enough to get it a set.
yeah. I agree. I agree. And I also agree that like once it finds a good home and it finds a way to combo off with some of these other cards that like beasts, like maybe it just becomes like the key to unlocking a fire tamer deck too. Who knows? All right, next we've got Explosive Rune. This card's bad.
This one's absolutely not in my opinion. Like one damage to target ally just doesn't do all that much. And then two of its attacking. This feels like a card that's really good and limited.
Yeah, I would agree. This is definitely a limited card where like you're not pulling a lot of regalia anyways, so like you have the liberty to materialize random stuff like this. In constructed, it's just got you I mean like you have to banish it so you get a one-time use. It uses your material phase to maybe kill an ally. It's just
Yeah,
not good.
it's just not it for me. Like I think there's just so much other better removal that you wouldn't want to waste a materialization on this,
Mhm.
especially if like you're a kind of deck that wants to like pull this out of your material deck. Usually your material deck like this card would be good in a control deck, maybe good against some things, and I I just don't even know. Like if you're really afraid of Blitz Mage specifically,
Right, yeah. And like it is some of the only removal in the game that is searchable technically, like you can get it whenever you want. Just I don't know if it's quite enough. All right, up next. We've got Fire Tongue. This is the sword, the fire sword. Um this card's fine. It's okay. I think it'll be in the Fire Lorraine decks, maybe in place of like Warrior's Longsword, just because it can stay on the field for longer and it still has the same number of damage. But outside of that, it's like it's okay.
yeah, I think it's really interesting that it can kind of be permanent if you keep removing fire cards from your graveyard. But you know, when you put cards in your graveyard, it's usually something you usually don't have that many extra outside of like because you usually want this isn't a deck that wants to play Rending Flame or Fiery Momentum, and getting rid of fire cards out of your graveyard isn't necessarily like exactly what you want to be doing there.
Hmm. Yeah, because there's
I think this is a card that doesn't necessarily have a home in my opinion right now, but I think it's strong enough to still get a 6.
yeah. The on its own, it's like it stays in play for a while. So I mean, I could see it in like maybe like Lorraine builds that are leaning more into like Spirit's Blessing. It's just like another regalia that sticks on the field for longer, so you can like return it later to use your other effects. Like I can see it going in something like that, but it's like it's just fine on its own.
This is a card I feel like we might just end up being low on when it's all said and done with set two, but I just don't know what home it fits in right now.
Hmm. All right, Verrucken's Soul Knife. We also gave this one a 6 out of 10. So, this one's interesting because you can. It's got like the same downside as the other one, where it's like in Fire Xander, which is like that's the home for this Fire Assassin. Um, you don't really want to be banishing your fire cards from grave because you really want to be doing that when you cast Rending Flames, right? And so
Yeah.
and even then when you kill if you kill something with this, it goes back to material decks. It's like you can kind of bounce this in and out like as much as you want rather than like losing it permanently. But like I don't know, I feel like the fire elements in your grave is like really important to keep there. So
Yeah, I agree. I'm just not sure where this fits yet. It has a really cool effect. But with what we have, like the kit Fire Xander has right now, I agree. I just like it seems a little counterintuitive to what you would actually be wanting to do. And 3 fire element cards is a lot. Yeah,
yeah.
it gets you a weapon out of your material deck without actually having to materialize it because it's an activation. But that's a lot of cards.
Like I could potentially see it because I've played a lot of like Fire Xander Burn, and sometimes you don't draw Rending, and in those instances I could see this going in the deck as like a card you use just to activate Inspiring Call, a card you use, maybe it's a defensive card too. You can like activate on your turn, and then now your deflecting edges are free casts, right? It's like
It's
there's
not a sword.
oh yep, stagger, so it's not even
Dagger.
deflecting edge. Yeah, so I mean it's just like yeah, I don't know where the home is. If it did a little bit more damage, it might be like more convenient to bring out and then try to like combo this and Running Flames in the same turn. But
This could
it's
also just
tough.
be one of those cards where like you have a lot of extra room in a fire burn deck, like a Xander one, and it's just good enough to banish 3 fire elemental cards to get one
Yeah,
damage.
yeah, no, it's true. Or it could be 4 damage off of a Blazing Throw,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
So
that's very true.
like there's use cases for it. Um, the unfortunate thing is that the returning to your material deck is only on kill, and so I think like in a deck like that, you're like you want to use this to attack into the champion, but if you do that, it's just gone forever and you can't get it back. So it's like like you lose a bit of the recursion. I don't know. This one seems tough to find a home, but it'll probably slot into those decks just because they have space to play it.
It's got potential.
All right. Up next, we've got the one that we spoil. We've got Erendite Azure Blade. And this one we settled at a 7.5 out of 10. I think we were between 7 and 8. I think 8 is probably a little bit too high for this card. I thought 7 was a little bit too low, so right in the middle. This card it's like on its own, it's fine, and like in the deck that it's maybe like supposed to be played in, which is like Mordred shenanigans. It's kind of funny, but probably not quite good enough. Um, I'm thinking of this card specifically as an soul card. Maybe just to like get a little bit of extra damage out of like floating that you don't need anymore because you're already level 3. I don't know. It's like it has potential to swing for really big numbers, which is something that water can't really do on its own. So in water, it could maybe be good enough just to be a big sword and hit hard. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I think this is solid just even as a 3-2 or a 5. Like a 5-2 I think is exceptional. I don't think the game plan of this card is necessarily to make it a 9 attack sword, but
right.
just as like this is a 3 or this is a 5.
Yeah. I think actually something that I played Windlering at our last locals, and I was like trying to find a good win condition with just infusions and stuff, and having just a 3 damage sword with 2 durability on it, so you can attack twice if you use Spirit's Blessing. It's pretty good. So maybe even as a 3 damage 2 durability is good enough. Um, so yeah, I think it's just a fine card. I think 7.5 feels like a pretty solid average rating for a fine card.
Agree.
Up next, Cloak of Stillwater.
It's another interesting one because it replaces itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it very much relies on you having floating memory in your graveyard to keep preventing damage.
Yep.
And it's just hard to keep getting floating memory in your graveyard, especially
Yep.
if you're on water. If you're a deck that has a lot of excess floating memory in your graveyard, you have to decide between: do you want to prevent 3 damage with this? Do you want to draw a card and buff your Frostborn Paladin? Or do you want to remove a card out of your opponent's memory with a new fractal? And this also takes a materialization, and I think this one loses.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, like it's nice that it replaces itself. It's nice that it prevents any damage and not just
Mm-hmm.
like a specific type of damage. But I just think you just don't have the ability to put that much floating in your grave to get that much value out of this like over the long run. So
Yeah, and it's just we have so many options against like faster decks right now. Again, I just think this one doesn't quite fit right now. And to get the replacement you have, this only goes in Water Sander.
yeah.
And I just don't think you want this in Water Sander because your material deck is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Up next, we got Wand of Frost, another 6 out of 10. Another card that replaces itself on enter, and then like instead of protecting you, this time you crack this one, you reduce an incoming attack. I just don't. I don't know.
It,
It protects you from 3 damage, and I don't know. I mean, I could see like if you target a champion with this, like their attacks get -3, so even if they cast like an attack action, they still are like suffering a reduced damage output. So it might save you from like a turn of like Rending Flames or like some of the stronger attacks. But even then, it's like I just feel like this is not a card that's worth materializing.
this hard counters 1,000 refractions.
Did Thousand Refractions need a hard counter?
No, but
There's just so many other
I,
cards that also do that.
mage. You have to be mage to get it to replace itself.
Cleric.
Yeah, I think this is fine against like rending, but you know what else is fine against rending? The fire trinket that just banishes 3 fire cards,
Yep.
or
Deflecting
or
Edge, Resolute Stand,
lantern. Like
Lantern, Peaceful
I just think with
Reunion.
so many options we have now, and I'm sounding like a broken record. I think this card doesn't quite make it, but I think it's solid enough to where, depending on the deck you're playing, maybe that 3 damage is good enough to absorb. I don't know.
Yep.
I don't think it's quite there, but the fact that it replaces itself as a regalia, I think, is super good.
Mhm. Okay. Wild Heart Liar. This was slightly better. We got this one to 7 out of 10. So I like that. So even though it's a 1 cost, I like that it's reservable because it kind of recoups itself in value, even though it doesn't directly draw a card. So if influence is super relevant, that could be huge. And then it kind of lets you generate buff counters, which is interesting. You kind of have to play like a lot of harmonies and melodies to like actually get good use out of this, and like I don't know. It's hard to like fully put into perspective how good this is, but I think in the right world it can be powerful. But I think that's why it's kind of landed at a 7.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's so much potential for this card. Like you said, it essentially replaces itself. Good with influence, and there are a bunch of cards that like do well with like you want lower influence than your opponent. And like I think its second effect just kind of like I feel like if you can get it off once, I think it's good. If you can get it off twice, I think it's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And it really depends on how many harmonies or melodies you think you're playing, because if you're just trying to protect yourself with harmonies and melodies, and you do this card, I think this card might just be solid. I think it's a solid 7.
Yeah. I think. I mean, and I'm like thinking like the the new big one is like Song of Frost, which is the one that like ends the combat phase. So you can kind of like dodge an attack, get a buff counter. You can do stuff like you can do cute stuff with it. I think it's just a solid 7, like you said. Okay, Effigy of Gaia. I think this is like exactly the card that Wind Tamer wants. Cleave protection still gives you that level. It's like strictly better than Beast Bond Ears. I think is the +1 level. Yeah. So it's like, you're already playing that card. It's just better than that, so that's good, and it gives you a little bit of protection. That's a good card.
Yeah, no, I think it's just completely solid. I think it's exactly what Wind wanted and it gets a lot of go wide strategies in this set, and I think this is the perfect card for it. Like you might be pulling this card out like turn 2.
Yeah, yep, I think it's good. Up next, we got Ventus Staff of Zephyrs. So you also got this one an 8 out of 10. This is a really interesting one for Wind Mage, because you get bonus and light encounters if you want. So like once you get to Ride 2, your first mage spell, if your mage action, if you have this on board, can give you 2 in light encounters rather than 1. So it kind of lets you accelerate your draws, and it sort of acts as a form of removal. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, because it's whenever you activate a Wind Mage spell. It has to be specifically a Wind Mage spell, which a lot of the cards you are playing are Wind. It takes out the Arcane, and a lot of the normal cards you're playing are skills, so that doesn't matter. But, if you can get 3 alignment counters with this, that's an extra draw.
Yeah, that was a 0-cost draw 1. That's a GCR. Just over a longer game.
So. Sometimes just good enough, too.
Yeah, it's a pretty decent card. I like that it has 2 effects. I think it's really sweet.
Yeah, I think it's really solid. I think it will definitely find a home.
21, Windwalker Boots, 8 out of 10. So this is like, maybe the reason that Wind Assassin could be playable, because it's not right now.
It's really not right now.
Extra prep counters. Prep counters are already really hard to generate, and some of the prepared effects are actually like really good. It's just like hard to get prep counters on them. So like I could definitely see a strategy that uses this with the new the broker, whatever it is, the tap to draw.
Yeah.
You could just generate counters. You could maybe find a use for coup de grace if you're bold.
I really think Wind Tristan might actually be playable, like with this card. I really do. Generating 2 prep counters a turn is absurdly strong, especially with the guy that removes 2 prep counters and draws a card.
Yeah.
Like if you the ability to draw 2 cards every turn instead of 1 is kind of ridiculous. And Assassin does have a lot of, ways to generate more card advantage or removal with preparation counters, specifically in Wind. Yeah. So I really like this card. I like that this opens up a potential archetype to the point where maybe this card isn't great this set, but I think it has potential, and I think this card will be just fantastic in future sets as well.
Yeah, agree. Okay, then we got Zephyr's Edge. This one, so I read this weapon, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's a 2 damage sword. Then I was like, oh, it's an on enter trigger, which means that you specifically have to get this with Beseech the Winds. So which means it's not really a 0 cost. It's kind of a 3 cost activated sword. And it's like, it's just not good, man. It's just not good.
It's so like how often do you want to Beseech the Winds to get 2 damage? It's just not very often. Maybe this is there for it's just an extra target in your deck if you need it, but I don't know. I just don't like it. I think it's super duper okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I guess you could bring it out with Ensoul or Ascension, and then it will still get its on enter trigger to be a 2 damage sword, but it's just not, I don't feel like that's not good enough.
I don't think it's good enough. Like again, I think it's probably okay in Ensoul. I mean, it's good in Ensoul if you're on Wind, but like I don't think Ensoul's very good this set.
Yeah, it gets way worse, at least, for sure. Up next, alright, so we got Majestic Spirit. This is a pretty solid card. This is the first Regalia ally. Has a lot of keywords on it. Intercept Vigor is a really good combination because you can attack with it and still have it up. Gives your champion Spell Shroud, which, after thinking about it for a little bit, Spell Shroud is a little bit worse than it could be.
Yeah.
But it still protects you from some powerful stuff. Protects you from like Fireball. Protects you from Arcane Blast, Erratic Bolt. Like it protects you from kill spells, which is good. And it protects your board a little bit too. So like I think overall like the things that the card does is good. It's powerful. It just has to be like worth playing this in your material and Incarnate Majesty in the main. And it's like you gotta make sure you can actually get the combo off and have it be worth it. I don't know.
I think that's the reason this card gets an 8 is because if you are playing a deck that doesn't have an answer to this card beats you single-handedly.
Yeah.
Like, this card is, I think, meta-warping in the fact that you need to play an answer to it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, like, I think even, like, not Merlin, I think Lorraine is fine playing a copy of this card and playing a couple copies of Incarnate Mastery just because they know if you don't have an answer to this, the game is over.
True. Yeah. Yeah. I think that on its own, it's good. It is good. Up next, we got Fractured Crown. So the name of the set.
I do not think it's good.
No, it's like God. First attack each turn gets +2, but it's Luxem, so you're only playing it. If you're not playing it for the class bonus, you're playing it in just Xander, and Luxem Xander doesn't really care about its first attack each turn because that's just like doesn't synergize with the Luxem cards. The class bonus is only activated if your champion is Trisket. And it's like, God, you just have to build your deck in such a weird and bad way to maybe make your Trisket playable. And then I don't know, it's not good. It's not good.
Also, so much Regalia hate is going to be mainboarded right now. Yep. Like Fracturize, and I think all the fire decks are going to be playing. A lot of fire decks are going to be playing like Spurn to Ash and stuff to remove stuff. Win just has an answer to this card with Zephyr.
Yep.
Like, because if it goes away, it's done. Like, it's gone.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's. Yeah, it's because even Zephyr is just a destruction spell in this, because as soon as it gets suppressed, it leaves the field. That's like, Link is broken.
Also, I need to double check, but I'm pretty sure if you play this with Trisket, which gets the class bonus, you need to materialize this card after you become Trisket.
Yeah,
because you're linked to the other champion.
Yeah, you'd have to have Trisket on the field when this card enters play, so you could link it to it's just so convoluted and bad. It's
all it needed to say was each of its attacks gets +2, and then 1,000 Refractions is back, baby. But again, in a Luxem Xander deck, you really need every one of your cards in your material deck. And getting a 4 extra health with it's just not good.
But now my Trisket has 16.
Too much for a reward that's too easy to counter.
My Trisket has 16 health. Don't you dare do 12 and then Zephyr my crown. Don't do it.
I'm not gonna move on, but like it's not like Luxem Xander doesn't have a way to just kill allies on the board. Lightweight Assault kills allies every turn. Allies, once you become Xander, are not an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
especially ones that require 2 damage.
Yeah,
that you need an attack spell for.
This card's just not good. It's bad. No point in even talking about it even more than that. Covenant of Thorns. We give this one a 5. This card is very okay. I think being Terra restricts it a lot. I definitely see the uses for it because the Terra Tamer has like crawl. You've got you could play big beasts if that whatever element it is, right? So you can like definitely have like a tank on your board that's like soaking damage for you, but like you have to be level 3 to use this. It's still, I guess it wouldn't cost 1 because you have the class bonus, but I don't know. I just think it takes too long to get this online.
I don't think it's on home yet. I just don't think this card specifically has a home yet.
Yeah, it wants to be paired with something like similar in nature to intangible Geist, which is like this can't take attack damage. So it's like, you know, you can kind of have a pseudo lock going on until they can remove this. But right now, it's like I think you just put this on a big guy, and you're like, maybe they absorb enough damage to not die.
Yeah, I'm also just not really sure like what this is a counter for. Like, at what situation do I actually want to put this into play? I guess against like Rise, so they have to have one more burn spell. But I think you have like Beast Spawn boots and stuff, and I think you're fine against that. I don't know. I don't know what this quite is for yet, but the effect is really powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful once it has a really good target. But Terra is currently like the element that doesn't have the most support. They also don't have the most like card advantage engines, so it's like it's hard to find out exactly how it's gonna work in that deck. Speaking of Tamer, we got Bedivere, Woodland Overseer. So this card's pretty decent. I think overall, I mean, yeah, she protects your other animals and beasts. That's good. That's what you want. I think like one of the biggest complaints about playing the Tamer deck is that like you put down beasts on the board and then they just die before you get value out of them. So her having taunt is really good. And then she can buff your entire board if she dies if you're level 3. Like that's good. It's just like some solid stuff.
And she's an animal herself.
Yep.
So if you play the Swan Sylvie level 1, that's a 2/5. That's a pretty good stat line. Yeah, I just think this card is really solid. I think you're gonna put this in Tamer because I think it's just good.
Yep, just a good card. Okay, up next we got Blanche, Sheltering Saint. So I think we settled this one is an 8.5. This card is interesting. It's like you read it and you're like, dang, that's really good. And then it's like, well, she's also only a 2 health ally. You can only activate her fast at level 2 or higher, so she's like more of a mid to late game card when people probably already have the outs to this. But it's very interesting as like a single protection spell, because like if something's already targeting your champion, you can just play her onto the field and prevent probably like assuming you've already played a couple cards, you could maybe even be preventing like 5 or 6. Yeah, I think she's interesting. She's interesting. Definitely gonna get played.
Yeah, I think at worst, I think she's going to be in almost every sideboard, except maybe like a couple decks. But she's a fast activation. She basically eats a spell by herself, and if they're not playing a ton of allies, she eats 2 spells, which is phenomenal.
Yep. Yeah, 2 for 1. Very, very good. Definitely a sideboard card at the very least. Maybe even main for some specific decks. Capricious Lynx. Sorry, not Link. He's saving Hyrule. So Pride 4, 3/3. So 3 cost 3/3. Incredible stat line, right? Pride 4 is the thing that takes away from that. But then its on enter makes it lose abilities until the end of the turn. So you play this the first turn. It's just a really beefy Blitz Mage, and then after that you can activate it again in a couple turns when you're level 4. I think it's solid as a cheaper beast and an earlier game beast. That is something that like the beast-based decks are lacking a little bit, is like good beasts to put down. So I think this is a pretty good one, all things considered.
Yeah, I think this card's really solid. It is a 3/3 for 3, which is a very strong stat line to start with. And even when you're not Pride 4, you still have this on the field. You can still retaliate with it, so it protects itself a little bit. They have to put resources into actually removing it, and usually with Tamer, you're going to hit level 4 again. So if they don't use the resources to get rid of it, this is a 3/3 that's just still on your board.
Yeah.
Against Lorraine, maybe it's not that great because they can still cleave into it, but if you're playing kind of a go wide beast ally deck, this might be a 4/4. And then with the effigy, this has 6 health and it doesn't get cleaved. I think this card is really, really strong in Tamer, and I think this might just be a 4 of in every Tamer deck.
Yeah, I think this definitely takes like some of the slots of like the allies you're playing. I think it's just like too good value to pass up on. As long as you're at least you have the class. As long as you have the class bonus, you are always getting to do 3 damage when it hits the board. If you,
Yeah.
like you were saying, if you leveled to Sylvie 1 that turn, you get to do. It's a 4/4 now. It's a 3-cost 4/4. If you have Young Beast Spawner, it could even be up to like a 6/6. It's like swinging on its first turn. Like that's really good. So this is definitely one to watch in the Tamer decks. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think this is very rare to where it won't at least get 6 damage in, if not 8, because it should in theory hit twice.
Yeah,
Even when
absolutely.
it dies, it should hit something unless they're really just spending their resources to like fireball this or focused flame or something. But
hmm
I think that's a mistake if they do that.
Yeah. Up next, we got Cutting Broker. So we talked about this one already a little bit. Very good card. We have it a 9 out of 10. Really good in assassin decks. So you can generate prep counters. You can just draw free cards. Stealth. It kind of protects itself. Its stat line is like awkward enough for some spells to not be able to hit it. It's just a great card. This is just a very very good card.
No, I think it's really strong, especially in like when Xander or when Tristan, like I really want because this removes 2 prep and draws a card. But I think this card is just incredibly strong. Being able to have the ability to draw cards is just good. It's going
Mhm.
to be rare for a card that says specifically draw a card with a repeatable effect to not be really solid.
Yeah.
And I think again, as the game slows down, I think Xander gets better, and I think preparation counters get better as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Dawn of Ashes. We've got our domain here. The name of the first set. Uh, Taxes. Make them pay the taxes
Yeah,
for the non-Norn cards. Very good card. Very good card for especially like control ear builds.
yeah. Speaking of a card that just by itself really hurts Ascension, we're looking at this card.
hmm
Um, it really hurts anything that's trying to combo like Rye, um, Lorraine, faster decks. You put this down, and all of a sudden, instead of playing 2 allies a turn, they can only usually play one.
hmm
I think this card is just really strong as long as you are playing a deck that it is intended to play this card.
Yeah.
Like you can't just throw this into Win Lorraine and have a good time because your cards increase in cost as well.
hmm
But I think this card is just super solid because it's also you can play this as sort of a 1 turn fog if you want, where this card can kill itself with its upkeep at the beginning of Recollection, and now it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you can if you have like the capacity to amass a big hand. You can do your turn like normal, and then you just play this at the end of your turn, and you're like, all right, it's your go now. Except everything you play is expensive. And then it goes back to your turn. You're like, oh no, I had to sacrifice it. That's fine. It bought you a turn, and that's good in itself. So this is a very good
Yeah.
card. It will definitely see play, 100%. Up next, we have Develop Mana, which is maybe the worst card in the set. I think probably the worst card in the set. This card will not see any play.
I,
It's
I,
bad.
I think this card is like decent in sealed if you want to play Tamer, just so you have a permanent level counter, but like you don't want to play this in Mage. You
No,
like
God, it's
at very
so
best,
slow.
this card replaces itself with for 1 turn. It replaces itself with Lorraine. I strictly can't think of a situation in Constructed where I would ever play this card.
Yeah, no, this is a this is a card that's gonna end up in all the bulk piles. That's just not gonna go in a deck, and that's okay. You have to have a couple filler cards.
They can't all be all stars, and I think it's okay in sealed, but
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
really bad in limited.
yes, 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 absolutely. Okay, up next we got Fast Cure. So I mean, I think one thing about this which is cool is that it's generic 2-cost floating, fast floating
Yeah,
at that too. And it can heal. This is a fine
yeah.
card.
I think it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know how often you're actually going to be able to do the recover 4 if you're playing a slower deck that wants to recover.
hmm
Which is a downside. But it does replace itself. So at very worst, it's a 2-cost floating memory that you can play on your opponent's turn.
Yep.
Um, I think it's fine. I don't think this is like 4 of in every deck. I think
No,
this is like
absolutely.
you might play 4 of this in some decks. Like maybe if you're playing a deck with a lot of fractals, and you
Yeah.
just tend to have a low influence, you play this card, which is why he gets a 6.5.
Hmm.
But I don't see this being a card that just like fits in every deck, kind of like Idle Thoughts is right now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. A card that could fit into a lot of decks, though, Fractal of Insight. I think this is the first Fractal we're talking about here. Um,
Yeah,
and so I have this opinion about most of the Fractals where unless their on enter effect is very good, I feel like a lot of them won't necessarily be worth it unless you're building like into a fractal based strategy, like with influence
Mhm.
cards and whatever that is. This is one of them that I think fits into the has a good on enter effect. Glimpse
yeah.
2 is strong effect.
I think this card was pretty close to a 10, but I think on like kind of faster decks or decks where you need all 60 of your cards, which is I think people are going to run into a lot more than they think they will
Hmm.
when trying to fit fractals, where you might not actually want to play this because some other card is just strictly better. But for a lot of decks, where you're just trying to find cards, you're trying to find answers. I think this card's really good.
Yeah. I like the on enter effect. I mean, like Glimpse 2 is a very helpful consistency tool. Lets you find what you need. It replaces itself in the sense that it's a resource every single turn, and it lets you play at a low influence. So if you're playing any of the cards that say influence on them, like we just looked at, you can maybe get some more use out of those than your opponent can. But yeah, so this is definitely one of the better fractals that is available in the set.
And I think the fact that this card is not hindered really lends to itself, where you can use this to pay for reserve cost the same turn you play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you play this, you get Glimpse 2, and then you can, maybe tap it to play an Idle Thoughts that you just, or something. Probably not because you just glimpsed a card, but, it lets you, yeah, it basically costs 1, kind of, because it uses itself as a resource for your next cards. It's good. It's good.
Really close to a 10, but I'm not quite sold on fractals themselves quite yet.
Agree. Up next, this card's also very, very good, I think. Gawain Chivalrous Thief. Um, so 2+, True Sight, whatever. Um, it's fine. I guess it like helps play around like Shroud and Mist, which is cool. But this class bonus, so for assassins or rangers, on champion hit, you can sacrifice her, and then you look at their memory and discard a card from it. This is like targeted hand disruption. So you get to pick what you discard. You get to look at their memory. It's very strong, I think.
I think it's really strong, and in these kind of decks, this is exactly what you want. I think this card also combos extremely well with the Wind Hate Trinket, where you pick 2 cards out of your opponent's memory random and banish whatever's Wind. So if you're
Mhm.
going against Wind, you hit them with this. You pick out the card that's not Wind, and then you banish 2 Wind cards.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
in a deck like this, getting rid of your opponent's threats before they hit the board is just as good as killing them when they hit the board.
Mhm.
And this card gets to control more and really punish them for playing out their hand. I think this card's incredible.
Yeah, this is super super good. Um, and yeah, no, it's very good. I think it's being kept in check by the fact that it has 1 health. So if they have any amount of ping damage, it hits the board. They go, oh no, don't do that, and they just kill it. But
Yeah.
it's a very very good card, especially for the slower grindier controlly decks. Up next, Gentle Respite. It's another influence card. It's another generic floating, and I think that on its own makes it playable.
Hmm.
Um, and then if they have more influence than you, draw a card into memory. So it's like it can replace itself in 2 ways, which is actually really good. If it's floating and it draws a card into memory, at worst it replaces itself just by being a floating memory. Um, I don't know about this one. Like it's theoretically fine in like fractal based decks where you're gonna have a low influence anyways. or maybe just decks where you're going wide. I guess in that instance, like if you're going wide already, you're playing a lot of cards out. Like your influence is going to be pretty low, so it does like net you a lot of value. Um, but other than that, like again with the generic floating, same as Fast Cure is like, is it better than playing in Idle Thoughts? I don't know.
Yeah, a card having the potential to be a +1, I think, is really strong.
Mhm.
It's just finding the opportunity to actually, have this work in your favor. Because you're not really ever going to be able to play this like early going second because at worst they're going to have 7 cards in your hand. The place this might actually fit is if you are playing the new spirits, where you're automatically starting with a less card in your hand,
Mhm.
and so you'll, in theory, if you're going against a draw 7 spirit, you're going to have less influence, and this card is a +1 to get you back to even.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe in those strategies, but I don't know quite yet. I think this could easily be one of the cards where 5.5 is way too low at the end of the day.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, it might
I
be.
could also just see a universe where this card just doesn't really see play.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything that was just said. Up next, Imperious Highlander gave her a 3 out of 10. I think like I don't know, like this card wants to very specifically be against a deck that's playing a lot of allies, and you have to be playing a deck that's not playing a lot of allies, which like doesn't bode well for her in general. It means that like you kind of just have to jam her into your strategy awkwardly. Like I don't know, this card's it's
I
whatever.
think she's a limited all-star. I think
Yeah,
this card is absolutely incredible and sealed.
yeah,
But unless there's like something in like set 3 or set 4 that just like makes infinite tokens and you can Shroud in the Mist and play this and just win, I don't know.
yeah. No, I agree. Up next, Lancelot, Goliath of Issa. We gave him a 4 out of 10. I feel like a lot of people are gonna be upset about this one because it's kind of like an icon card. Um, but I think at the end of the day, he's a 4 cost 2/3 normally, right? He's
Mhm.
eventually a 2/5 at level 2. Um, he comes in the field rested, so like you don't get immediate value out of him, and then you can buff his attacks, but it's expensive to do so. It's effectively the same as casting a 3 cost like attack action. Uh, I just don't know where he fits really. And his extra health is a class bonus, so you have to be playing Guardian or Warrior and be level 2+. And like, I don't know. I just don't think he fits in the rain builds that are high level, and I don't know like what else you would do with him. He's I don't know. He's just okay.
I think maybe the place he would fit is in like a Lorraine control deck, where late in the game you'll just have a lot of cards. Maybe your opponent doesn't want to dedicate 5 damage to getting rid of this when they had to get rid of Majestic Spirits. But at what point is that just a win? That's the
Mm,
question I pose. At what point is that simply a win? And I don't know. I don't think this card is necessarily like bad, but I don't like in a vacuum. I don't think he's terrible, but I don't know where he would fit into my 60 cards. And with
yeah.
FTC, I think I just keep mentioning this. I think deck lists get a lot tighter as you have more cards to actually play, and I just don't see where this card fits in any of my strategies.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you want to play him in like a you want to get a lot of value out of him if you're playing it with him, but like most of the time you want to be playing your other cards to get the value. And like I feel like in like a burn deck, um like 3 cost could get me 3 damage, but also 3 cost could potentially get me like 5 or 6 damage depending on what else I'm putting it into. So even then, I don't know. He's fine.
And I don't think Burn wants. I think Burn's like slot is filled for this already. I think you're right. If you're playing
Yeah.
Burn, you should be playing like creature base. You should be playing for Arthur already.
Mhm.
You generally want to be playing for Gildas.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's room for 4 Lancelot or 3 Lancelot or even 2 Lancelot in there.
Yeah. Is
And if
not
there
quite
is, I
enough.
think he still deserves the 4 out of 10.
Yep. All right, Lurking Assailant. This one's got a 3.5 out of 10. Because this card is also just fine. Honestly, I think the 3.5 is like it's fine just considering he's a 3 cost 2/3. We have a lot of like 3 cost like 1/3s or 3 cost 2/2s, so like a slightly better stat line, and he can protect your other units. I think like he's okay.
I would give him the same rating if he had no text.
Yeah, just
I
as a 3
I
cost 2/3.
I don't think his text is like extremely valuable. Stealth as long as you're awake. Who cares?
Yep.
If you're playing this card, you're generally wanting to be attacking anyway, so
Yep.
who cares? A made tally against attackers not spend. I think this card's just great in limited again. I think this card is made to be good in limited, and that's
Limited
it.
all-star. Yep.
I think it's absolute limited all star. I think if I go against someone who has 4 of these in their deck and limited, I'm screwed.
Yeah, you're losing that game for sure, dude. All right, we got another good card finally. Morgan Soul Guide. Yeah, so this card has a lot of text on it, and all of it is good. So I mean, as long as you're level 1, she's immune to non-attack damage, so they have to put an attack into her, and at 3 health, that's like 2 ally attacks usually, or like an actual attack action with a weapon. So like that's not nothing. That eats a card. Preventing opponents from recovering is like kind of niche, but in a world where like slow grindy decks are going to be getting better, I think we will see a lot more Water Xander in the next set, and I think this is a card that deck doesn't love to see. Granted, they can still just like kill her with, you know, a bunch of the removal that they play in that deck, but it's still fine. It's still something that like annoys their combo for a turn, and then it gives you consistency. You know, if you're playing a mage, you get to either glimpse one if you don't recover one. Like it's just like a lot of good text on the card all at the same time, and she's just a 2 cost. Just a good card.
Yeah, I think you can like easily play her once you're just level 1 and just start getting value out of her. I think she's incredibly good in mage. I think she's incredibly good in like more controlling mage decks as well. I like her. 8.5 is I think a solid rating.
All right, up 40, we got Ordinary Bear. This bear is very ordinary.
Ordinary Bear.
Oddly enough, I think Ordinary Bear is actually like above ordinary in terms of being a beast. It's a 3 cost 2/3, so it's like probably a little bit better early game than Grey Wolf, which is 2 cost 2/2. Still has the same pride too, so it can get online pretty earlier than a lot of the other beasts in the game. And it has floating when they remove it, so like you don't just lose value when they go, you can't have that anymore. It's just a good card.
I think that's
fine
something
card.
really that Sylvie really needed is like with this like taming links or not taming links, whatever the links card is called, an ordinary bear. Like there's some sort of punishment for getting rid of it. Like
Yeah,
if you clear, you get a floating memory. It replaces itself. If you clear, you just wasted an attack on a 3/3 that wasn't doing anything. These are the cards that Sylvie needed to get more competitive. Yeah. And I don't know if Sylvie actually will be that much more competitive in set 2, but I think it's definitely getting the tools.
Yeah, it's definitely I think a 4 of beast. I think it just replaces the Grey Wolf slot, honestly, if you're just going for a 1-for-1. Because I think almost every instance that I was playing a Grey Wolf, this would just be better value. So
yeah,
I like it. Up next, one of the most powerful cards in the set, Peaceful Reunion. This card is so good. Gosh, turning off attacks for a turn is such an important like game mechanic in this game that like disabling it for an entire turn is just like take another turn. It's like you get +1 turn.
Yeah, it's not like you can 1-for-1 it. Like you might not be able to like eat an actual attack card with like Shroud and Mist, but being able to have this effect in every color, and like the decks that want to attack you, that wants to kill you by attacking you, this essentially just says take an extra turn, because they don't have an alternate way to do anything. This says pay for take an extra turn against a lot of decks.
Yeah, I mean like nice and soul deck. Like I see you posturing with like 8 cards in hand, and you're like, getting twitchy to play your on soul. It's like, nah, dude, no attacks. And like I think like specifically I keep looping back to it, but like something like Water Xander, where you have a lot of like the healing, it's like the pressure that some of those like fast decks can put on you is just like completely negated if you get 2 full turns of not taking any damage and then healing like 10 a turn. It's like that can bring you from like 1 point off lethal to almost fully healed in over
Yeah.
2 turns. Like that's so good. It's so good. And you can also just like play this card in like mage. You're like, I'm not declaring attacks anyways. I mean,
Yeah.
it just protects you from faster decks in mage. Like it's good. Good card. Up next we got Prismatic Sanctuary. This is a copium card, I think.
I cannot figure out where this card fits. I had a little bit of a moment in chat earlier where I was like, let's play this and Xander with every fractal, and I don't think so.
No, I think
I don't think so.
yeah, I like initially I saw this card and I was like, the one place that I see this being relevant is if you want to play allies. It lets you play Arthur and Phalanx Captain at the same time. And I'm like, okay, board buffers. You can play a warrior deck with Arthur, Phalanx Captain, Banner Knight, and just be like, my guys are all 5/2s, and we're attacking you for a bunch of damage. But outside of that, I'm like, I don't know when I really need to play the other element cards. Like, I don't, I don't think it's that relevant.
The biggest problem with this card is you can't like dedicate your deck to playing a lot of like off elements cards because you need to find this card still.
Yeah, there's no way to get it.
And,
There's no way to cheat it into play. It just you have to draw it.
and if you have multiple of them, it's not like you can just use the extras as resources. I mean, you can, but they might reveal and just sacrifice your Prismatic Sanctuary. I mean, you can play it again, but that wastes a turn of like
Yeah,
playing.
like you can combine it with the card that gives domains no upkeep cost, but then you have to find that card first, and then find this card, and then start developing your strategy. It's just so much to ask.
Yeah, I really wish Rite of Realm was a regalia, even if it cost like 2.
Sure,
But
yeah, just
we'll
to
get to that card in a minute.
yeah. Up next, Resolute Stand. This is
One
a
of the
very
first
good
cards
card.
revealed.
Yes, one of the earliest cards revealed. I mean, it's a very good card. I mean, it basically gives every deck access to like a sort of a hybrid Deflecting Edge Veiling Breeze combo. Uh,
Mhm.
but you get the ability to free cast it by just not drawing. So you're kind of just paying one basically one next turn to free cast it. But I mean, it saves you for a turn against ally decks. It saves you a turn against Unsoul. It's a fast card, so you can respond with it, even if it's the last card in your hand. Like during later games, like this is just a very very solid defense card. And if the things it counters are meta relevant, this will also be meta relevant.
Underrated card. This card is really strong, hitting your own Majestic Spirit, because this is a skill, not a spell. And I shit, maybe you don't even care about that. But like, if they have to attack into it anyway, this target is prevent whenever target unit
Yep.
would be dealt attack damage this turn. Now you just have like a wall that's just eating everything.
Yeah. This card is very good and a very very powerful defensive tool. Also, it looks sick.
Yeah, that was really cool. There was a reason this was one of the first cards they spoiled.
Yeah, this card's dope.
The other one, this one,
This one's sweet. All right, up next, Rite of Rome. We were just talking about this one. So it removes your upkeep costs from your domains, which is good because it lets them stay in play for longer. It's floating, which is also good. It's just like I don't know. It's hard in order to combo this. So one, you have to be like you have to really want the domain in play. And like for a lot of the domains right now, like Dawn of Ashes is like the one that I could see like a deck being like, I want this to stay around as long as possible. So I'm like gonna try to not pay upkeep costs on it because it might sack itself. But the other ones are like, eh. Like no one's playing Avalon or Camelot anyways. Varuk I could see being a card that you're like, I want this card to be in play. But then like in order to combo this, like you have to put this on the field and then cast the domain, and it's like that's an entire turn if you're doing them both at once. I don't know. It just seems like it's hard to actually fully pull off the combo, but like if you can get it, it'll be really good.
I think they're just not. The domains aren't powerful enough right now
Mhm.
and restrictive enough with their domain cost to where this is uber important.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't know. Because if you play this card, you're probably kind of forced to play 4 of it.
Yeah, because you just
And
need to see it.
I don't know if that is worth a slot in your 60.
Mm-hmm. Just play 100 cards.
But I
Easy.
think it is strong enough of an effect to still warrant a 7.5.
Yeah.
Because the potential for this card is just there.
Yeah, the potential is limitless. I think like right now the cards that actually abuse it are not strong enough. Like I said, I think Dawn of Ash is like the main abuser. If you play a control deck and you can piece that together, you're like, great. Like, I never have to pay the upkeep costs. Like permanent tax for you, permanent tax for me that I don't care about. Great. Other than that, it'll be hard to play. Up next, Scavenging Raccoon. I am very excited about this card. I love this card.
It's very sweet.
It's very good on enter effect. Targeted banishing, I think, is going to be an effect that is decent now. It's definitely very good against like floating memory, so people who are trying to like hard stack floating memory in their grave. It's definitely good against that. People have to like play around it aggressively. And then it kind of like future proofs some stuff where in a world where we get like if there's ever like a necromancer class or something that does something similar and they like reanimate stuff from the grave because like every card game eventually starts using the graveyard as a second hand. Like, you know, if people are like reanimating stuff from grave, you can hit it, or you know, you could do stuff. Like, I think this card is really versatile and also not too overtuned. I just think it's really good.
No, I agree. It hits really hits fire really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Floating memory, you know, you have to be a lot more strategic with how you stack that, how you play that. And against crooks, you know, if you're not ascensioning like a ton, you can't like really afford to like discard cards all that much, like your crux cards, or they're just going to get banished with this. I could see this being like seeing play in a lot of decks, if not you know a majority of decks in the format.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this card is very, very good. And there's even like niche uses. Like if you're playing Rye, you use 2 arcane sites, and then you
Yeah,
use this to
banish
banish your
from
2 arcane sites.
Hellraiser.
That's 4 levels off of 2 cards. So good.
Yeah, no, I think that's an incredibly reasonable thing that could happen. I think it's really good.
Yeah. All right. Up next, Seeking Shot. This card is, meh. It's pretty bad. I think this is another limited All-Star card. Where you can look at any human ally that people are playing, and this is effectively it's a 1 cost instant removal for any human ally because it's like a 1 cost 4 damage, which is like a really solid trade-off. But like there's just so many other better attacks than like if you're using that to just clear a single human ally, I don't know, it's just not worth it. Like you just use a cleave.
There's a universe.
Yeah.
There's a universe where you could sideboard this card against like Assassin, where they're playing a lot of units with stealth. And a lot of units you
Yeah.
want to get rid of that have stealth. There's a universe of that. But I don't think it's super good. I think it's a very niche card, which I think a 3 out of 10 is a perfectly reasonable rating for it. And this is the first card I think we've ever had that has a class bonus that can't be activated.
Yeah. There's Ranger is not a class in the game yet, so not being able to retaliate it. I mean, granted, the class bonus is not that relevant, but you can activate the class bonus in sealed if you're using Gate of Alterity to change your class at the beginning of the game to Ranger.
I
If you
suppose
do
you
that,
can.
you
I
can.
suppose you.
But
But I think you're right. I think this card's incredible and limited. It's a 1 cost attack that kills an ally. I think that's incredible and limited.
Yep, but not good enough in constructed. Uh, Stalwart Shieldmate. This is a solid card. It's taunt floating memory, a good combo. I mean, we already see a lot of play out of Swift Recruit, which is intercept floating. So it's a very similar concept to that. It's generic, so every deck gets access to it. It's just solid.
I think this is slightly better than Library Witch in a lot of decks, to where you can kind of control, like it's, you're not drawing a card, but you can control the card you banish when you level up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's fine. I think it's good. I think it's a 7.5 is really strong. I don't think it's a 10. I don't think you're going to start seeing 4 of this in every deck. But
Nope.
I think this is a solid card that, especially with how powerful Taunt is, I think there's a lot of potential for this card just to be strong if you could just buff it a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. Up next, Steady Verse. We got Melody here. Makes your harmonies cheaper. It draws a card into memory, so like, it does just replace itself like by default. It just always does that, and then it makes the next card cheaper. So it's kind of like acts as one resource and draws a card. Um, it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's good if you're playing, if you have a lot of like melody harmony combinations, like if you're playing the lyre and maybe you're just like a water deck that's playing it just cards that do that. You want to just get a tortoise really, really big. It
Mhm.
replaces itself, it makes something cost one less. I think this is a solid option for one of those like tamer combo decks that kind of do that. Something interesting about this card is a lot of the clerics also use melodies and harmonies, it seems. And I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
see how that develops for set 3.
Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting point. Thieving Cut. So just look at the stats of this card. 2 cost, 3 attack is pretty good for pay versus reward. Then you can prepare it to draw a card. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a draw card and it's a removal. Um, I just think, yeah, all things considered, it's just a pretty solid card.
I think it's a solid removal for Xander decks that just have preparation counters. The fact that this will replace itself, I think is good enough on a removal card.
Yep, yep, I like it. I like it. All right. Blazing Bowman. Um, so again with like allies like this, I look at the stats. 3 cost 2/1 is pretty low, but on his on enter, you can banish a fire to get +2, so he's kind of a 4/1. Um, his attacks can't be retaliated, which is really interesting because like unlike Blitzmage, which is like the thing that I'm comparing this to, is like a lot of times if you're not using Blitzmage to go face, you're just using it to clear some ally. That's big, and this guy could maybe be better at clearing allies. Um, just as easy to remove, so I think he's just a fine card overall.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, Korhazi Arsonist, because I think we talked about this last week. It's fine. It's another fine card. 3 cost 2/2 is like whatever stat line. It's pretty standard. And then I think like the biggest effect is that she can avoid on death triggers, so
Yeah,
you can
you
just
kill
clear.
library witch or the taunt loading memory without them
Yep.
getting value, but I think that's such
Yeah,
a
it's
niche
niche.
situation. I think she has a home, but I don't know what it is yet.
Mm-hmm. All right, Flamebreak Chorus. It's another fine card. Fast activation for class bonus is cool because it lets you buff your allies to maybe like retaliate for a lot of damage if they're not expecting it on your opponent's turn. And then at the end of the day, I think this is just a better version of Ember Song. Um, because like interrupting decks like Ember Song kind of doesn't really do anything.
Mm.
You just play it for the melody effect. So this one, if you have an ally on board, it at least also lets you push for 2 more damage. So like, I think it just replaces Ember Song in a lot of the erupting decks, and it can be better in Tamer.
Yeah, especially with a lot of like the erupting decks being more ally based now, like with what the direction they're going. This is really good against cleave. This can get you an extra 6 damage sometimes, maybe more.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think this card's good. Not like broken, but just good. Honed by Fire. So this one we had a little bit of a discrepancy on. So Andy threw up the rating of 2 out of 10 on this card, and I was like, hold on. It's not amazing, but I think it's better than that. But I want to hear your argument for 2 out of 10 first, and then I'm just gonna say my piece after that.
I don't think it's very good. That's why I put it as a 2 out of 10. Uh, you know, as a 2 cost, I think the dream scenario in a lot of people's heads is you play this and you play your ending in a turn.
Mhm.
For that you need to have 7 cards in your hand, which isn't unreasonable. It's not unreasonable, but you need to have 7 cards, and you need your opponent not to have anything to like stop rending. So like I think at best this is a game 1 card, and I think just to attack added durability. If you're playing something like burning, like a burn deck, I don't think is quite good enough.
Yeah, I see that. I
It's
mean,
been
I
limited.
think sure. I think I mean like this is also not one that I'm like I'm gonna fight for this to be a crazy good card because I also think the card is just fine. Um, but I think being a fast damage buff and a durability counter lets you keep swords on board. You can use it in the damage step, just like spring an extra 2 damage on it, where your opponent might not have a good counter for it. And at the end of the day, it's also just like a +1 engrave for running flames. Like I don't think I would put it higher than like a 5, which is why I'm not gonna like fight too hard for this one. But like I do think there are uses where just having a fast +2 damage might be like really important.
And we both disagree on ratings, so we can't be wrong in the
It's
future.
true. True. Yep. We're we can't be wrong. Future proofing. All right. Incendiary Fractals. This is another one of the really good fractals. Um,
Yeah, this card's sweet.
yeah, I like this card a lot. It's a removal spell that gets to be a resource for the rest of the game. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think it's just really good. I think this might like the generic fractal like glimpses too. I think is really good. I think this one's better.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I would agree.
even if you're not a mage, 2 damage to an ally you don't control is still really good in the matchups you want it.
Yep.
It's an on enter effect, so you don't actually like if your opponent doesn't have an ally, you can still play this card down, which is not like great, but you still have that
Yeah.
option where it's not a dead card in your hand. And if
Hmm.
you are in mage, it's 4 damage. I think this is
Yeah.
just like yeah, it costs 4, but I think in a lot of situations, and what mage is trying to do, this is strictly better than like focused flames
Yeah. And
because
and
it does replace itself.
yeah, in a longer game, this is just a free 4 damage to an ally. It's just a removal spell for free, which is so good. It's so good. All right, up next we got Innervate Fury. So of the cards of this type, I think this is like the worst one. Um,
Yeah,
so 3 cost, slow. I think Wind is the only one that has a fast one, but dealable recover 5 like all of them, and then 7 damage split among any amount of target allies. Like in order for this to be relevant, you have to be playing against allies, which like not every deck is playing heavy into. Fire doesn't really care nearly as much about D level recover since a lot of fire is about like go go go. I'm gonna like push my game plan as fast as possible. Uh, I just don't think this card is gonna see much play at all.
the other big problem, I think 7 is a really awkward number. So where against a lot of decks, like if you're going against Windblerain, you're probably only killing 2 things with this.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of those matchups, I think they're usually pretty happy to trade 2 allies for. I mean, you're recovering 5, but like you need to level back up.
Yeah, right. Like I don't know. It's just not. It's not quite it. I don't think there's a world in which any of the fire decks like genuinely want to play this card over anything else in their deck.
Yeah, I think at best it's a sideboard card against an archetype. I think you'd be better off just siding something else against.
Mm-hmm. All right, red slime. This was kind of cool. A little niche, I think, but it's a bomb. it blows up and kills a lot of stuff on the field. I can see comboing this with like cremation ritual, right?
Mhm.
You have this guy, and then you just purposefully sack him to nuke your opponent's board. Uh, his default damage is 3 to the entire board, which is actually a pretty decent breakpoint.
Mhm.
But it's just like it's so specific. And at least with the way that like targeted attacking works in this game, if your opponent doesn't want the red slime to blow up, they just won't attack it.
Yeah,
Just go around it.
they won't attack it, so you have to kill it yourself. And if you give it a buff counter, which I think against a lot of matchups you actually want this, you want to give it the buff counter with level
Hmm.
1 Sylvie, which
Yep.
means you have to do a 3 damage to it. I mean, I don't think Fire Sylvie is in a good place in this meta, just by the cards we've seen. And I don't think this card helps because this is a class bonus to blow up. This isn't something you can just put in Rye.
Hmm.
I,
And
I,
get
I
a free
don't
grenade.
think this card has a home right now, but its effect is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it's very strong. It can clear an entire board, um, which is not something to scoff at in the future. It's just right now, yeah, I agree. This is not a great spot for it. Up next, Varukan Acolyte. So this is Spurn to Ash, on legs, I guess.
On a stick?
Um, so it also destroys a zero cost regalia. So a little bit worse than Spurn to Ash, but like you want this to destroy Lantern. That's like the point. You kill
Yeah.
Lantern with this. And then level 3 or higher, she gets +3 damage. I think the decks that like really care about Lantern aren't really going to level 3 anyways, so she's just a 3 cost on board removal. Like, I don't know. She's
It,
not great.
it's like you're supposed to play with Erupting, which already has so much hate. Um, you're supposed to play it in Erupting because you'll get to level 3 after the Erupting.
Mhm.
But I think that is the only deck this goes into.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just nothing
Which
else that
I
wants
think
it.
is fine to warrant a 4 out of 10. A 4 out of 10 isn't an unplayable card. It's a niche
Hmm.
card.
Hmm.
And I think this is a perfect example of a card that is a 4 out of 10.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, into the water cards.
Ooh, water. This is a big hitter.
Yeah, right. Korhazi Trapper. So you get a prep counter on enter, which is like good considering the prep counter effects we have in this set. And then you can remove prep counters to nerf someone's attacks. 3 cost 1/3 um, is a fine stat line. It's not great, not horrible. Yeah, it's fine. I think like the biggest thing is that it targets a unit and not just an ally. So you
Yeah.
can nerf champion attacks with this, which is like very nice. But I think like Water Assassin is like the deck that might want to play this, right? And I think they already have like the list is just so tight. I don't know if this effect is quite worth it. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's good. I think this card is actually pretty good, just because there is a small situation where you might not actually put this in the assassin deck, and because it gets a preparation counter on yourself. Um, but I think there are situations in Water Assassin where just giving a unit's tax -3 is just strong, especially if you can replace those preparation counters later in the game. Because this is a little bit deceiving because they're never going to want to kill this card, really.
Yeah, because it doesn't really do
It,
anything.
it doesn't really do anything,
Yeah,
especially
close.
outside once you get past your first counter from level 1. Because in water, you're not really gaining counters again till level 3.
Mhm.
But if you're going against a deck where this is good against that, they're probably never actually killing this card. So where one if you can get to level 3 and you can start like adding more prep counters with Uncover the Plot, this card gets a lot stronger. I think this is solid. I like it at 6. I think this could be a card that we could be completely wrong on. It could be like a 2.
Yeah,
But I think it's just strong enough in my mind to where even if you play like 1 or 2 of this card, I think it could just be good enough.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Deep Sea Fractal. So this fractal does enter rested. Hindered is the keyword for that. So you can't use it immediately, but it is a 2-cost fractal, so it's like pretty cheap compared to like the fire one that we just looked at. And then it mills one. Like it's pretty decent. Like I can see like there's a lot of the cards now that like especially in water that say like you can also banish a floating memory and do this bonus effect, right? Like we have that on Frostborn Paladin is like the old big one. There's like the new Regalia that does it. So like milling yourself is helpful sometimes, but also like you have the potential to just like accidentally high roll for your opponent and they mill a floating on turn one. It's like, uh-oh, I can't I can't do anything about that. Uh, and after that, it's just a resource. Like it's okay.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of high on the fractals to start, just because their effect is really powerful. When this card does hit, because you're probably playing this in like uh Xander or Rye,
Mhm.
where you have floating. If you mill a floating memory, you're in a really good place. If you mill an arcane spell, you're in a really good place. And with Xander, you have like a glimpse to, or like idle thoughts, where you can see more cards to where there's more potential for you to actually hit something that's useful to you.
Mhm.
I don't think this you just throw this in like Lorraine in every deck.
No.
You do play this in Mordred because you
Yep.
want cards
You
milled,
want a text? Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but
Again, I think like there are gonna be decks that are gonna be trying out like the fractal package where you just play like a bunch of fractals and a bunch of influence cards and then like refracting missiles, which we'll get to that in a second. Uh, and just like seeing how that feels as sort of like a resource engine. And I could see it with like the new Luxem card, which again we'll get to. Illuminate Secrets, I think does damage based on the difference in influence, right? So
yes.
if you're playing into a heavy like I'm gonna have a low hand but still have lots of resources up at all times. I could see it just because it's another fractal, but on its own, I think this one like the effect is nothing like super special.
Yeah, I think it's just barely could be good enough, but we will see.
We will see. Uh, this one is the opposite. This one's very cool. So Fractal of Intrusion. I actually this is one that I like missed in the original spoilers, and so like as I was putting together this, I was like reading this for the first time. I was like, oh, this card's sick. So again with the extra floating memory, right? If you banish one, it's the same as Gawain, right? You get to look at their memory and discard a card from it, and
Mhm.
I mean that is an incredibly powerful effect. It's just this one you have to banish a floating for it, so you have to be sort of set up already before playing it, so it's not like an early game tool. I think they like specifically made these effects not available in the early game, right? Um,
Yeah,
like Gawain's two plus. This one you have to have floating already. Um, but I mean, again, ripping a card from their hand is very powerful in this game. So
yeah, and then the decks you want to do it.
yeah.
It's super strong. It's a 1-for-1, but like in current Water Xander, you're okay getting three a lot slower against a lot of decks. And as the format slows down, if you can rip a key card out of their memory, that's well worth it. Because
Mhm.
the card does replace itself by being a reservable. You lose a floating memory, but you rip a card. So it's kind of a positive.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think like something that's gonna be interesting too is that I find myself having turns a lot where I'm like I will put one card in my memory before leveling up because I'm like I'm going to use one floating and this one card that I know I can get rid of. And so if you
mhm.
just do this and you just discard their one memory, they're like I can't level up next turn. I don't have enough cards to do it. So like you just get like value in like disrupting your opponent that way. So I think in a fractal based deck, this is an absolute four of for sure. Um, and
I,
I
I, I
think yeah,
think I think I play this, and I would play this and Gawain and just like control decks now. Just being able to rip those cards is
yeah,
because, man, if you can rip the main thread out of their hand before they play
mhm.
it, you're in business. Also, Gawain, the level 2 is True Sight. It's just a class bonus for
Oh right, assassin class
you can do
bonus.
it at
Yeah,
level 1.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
imagine ripping just like
Nice
even
dungeon
against like
guide
Erupting
loser.
Rai, you rip Erupting out of their hand,
Yeah.
or you rip a Spurned Ash out of their
Yep.
hand.
Yep. You rip the DG. You rip the some other
Like
really important. piece.
I think people are wanted water to be a lot worse. And I think with this set, with water getting better, people are going to really regret it. And I think they're
Yeah.
going to hate it.
Yeah, water is very quickly going to become one of the most hated elements. I'm thrilled about that. I love this stuff. I'm so excited. I'm gonna piss some people off. All right, let's move on. Fracture Eyes. Let's get to some of the 10 out of 10 cards.
This card is so good.
Fast 2 cost. Item or weapon becomes a fractal Fantasia with reservable, loses all other abilities, and its floating memory. This card is absurd. So the crazy thing that I was looking at the other day is that Fantasia is the super type of the card, right? So it like replaces like words like regalia, which is super dope in terms of like a lot of the crux cards that say like return target regalia to the deck. Like you can't target that anymore. It's not a regalia, so you can't reuse the effects. It's great at countering like Lorraine builds. You can just say that's not a sword anymore. It's just it's so good.
It is so powerful, and it's so versatile too. Because you can use this like in a like if you're just like I'm not really in a matchup where any of these cards matter. You can just like pull something out of your memory that costs 0 and just make it a fractal.
Mm-hmm.
And then this card becomes a +1 because it replaces itself with a floating memory, and you get a fractal.
Yep. Yeah, it just turns into
this
a
card is
resource.
absurd, and it's fast.
And it's a floating memory still. It's so good. This card's insane.
It's absolutely incredible.
I believe the next card is also insane too, right? Yeah, it's Frostbind.
Yeah,
yep.
Also a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, we talked about this last week too. Great effect. God, it's so good. Closest thing we have to a counterspell in this game. Force the extra cards in hand. This is really good against combo decks when they go down to a low hand size. They're like, I'm gonna use this last card and then I'm gonna do stuff. You're just like, no, you're not. I think like in addition to the other stuff that already punishes like Arcane Rye, this is another card that says like you have to be very smart about which order you play your cards in, because if you have one card in hand and it's a reckless conversion, that's not resolving. You do not get that card.
It also makes cards like in Soul way harder to play, because a lot of the time you'll play in Soul once you get to 3 and you have 7 cards in your hand. And you can't do that anymore if your opponent's playing Water, because they'll have this.
Mm-hmm.
This was a big reason why they needed to put that trinket in that made all of the cards on your opponent's turn cost 2 more if they're Water.
Yeah.
Specifically for this card. Mm-hmm. Because even at 4 cost, I think this card's still incredibly playable.
Yeah, absolutely. This card is insane, and it's like an instant 4 of in like the slower Water decks. Even not control. It's just like any Water build that's like I'm gonna be a little bit slower at getting to my game plan. You still just play this at 4.
Just put it in. It's also like having to play around this. The threat of this card is strong enough. Like the threat of I either am running into this card or I have to play around this card is really hard. Going to be really hard for a lot of decks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's also every card this gets rid of, like, is stronger than this card itself. Like if you're trading this for an Unsold, that's a winning trade.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, this card's very, very, very good. You'll see a lot of it in the next couple months. Frostbinder Apostle. So this one, it's fine. This is also one that we like kind of had a discrepancy on, but again, it's similar to the Hone by Flare. I was like, it's not a card that I would put at like any higher than 5 anyways, so I'm not gonna fight on it because it's still at the end of the day just a fine card. It's effectively a removal spell in the late game, but it's also a body on the board with intercept, so it's like it's okay.
The thing that kills me with this card is to kill something, it has to be rested. So that means it's already hit you.
Yep. Yeah, and so
I think it's really good and limited. I think it's fantastic and limited. Every
time we say a card is bad, it's like, but in sealed. In sealed, this is a monster. It kills it eats like 2 cards. Yeah, this card's just fine. Guarded Dissipation, another like just fine card. I think this card would literally be fine if it didn't have the top text and it just said draw a card. Because it's also going to probably prevent like 2 damage. which is like sometimes good enough. But it says draw card on it, so that's good.
Yeah, I mean, with the water mordred sword, sometimes you're running 5,
It
sometimes you're
could.
running 7, sometimes you're running 3. But I think drawing a card is also solid. I think in decks that have swords and stuff, it's good because it also targets any unit, so it can protect your allies too.
Mhm. Yep, and it's also not class bonus; it's level bonus. So like you could play this in any water deck that you're just like I just want a draw spell.
No, I think it's good.
Is fine. Innervate Knowledge. This is another one of the D level recover fives. We talked about this last week. This one also lets you draw 2, but it is a 4 cost, so it's like pretty expensive. Draw 2 cards is good. Um, I think this one is also just fine. I think water is definitely an element that benefits more from recovery than fire does. And it's also an element
Yeah,
that has less draw power than fire does. So like having a card that just says draw 2 cards in water is good. Um,
I think we kind of covered everything we need to in the last video on this. I think it's good.
yep. All right, Ocean's Blessing. It's another very good card. So ally link taunt, and then class bonus floating. 2 cost taunt. I think this card is like the thing that makes the intangible geist like lock possible. Intangible geist taunt means just like you're forever immune to attack damage
Yeah.
until they can remove it or remove this. There is the card that like counter or that destroys a Fantasia, so that does hit this card. Um, it's a good card. Taunt is a really powerful effect, so giving taunt to anything is very powerful.
Yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, it's
Protective Fractal. All right, what do you think about this one? Just in terms of compared to the other fractals we have and stuff.
I think it's I think this one's really, really good because one, it is not hindered. So you can play this for 4 and then you can still play another card pretty easily. So I think it's solid with that. And if you play this early enough, this card can absorb, 4, 5, 6, how long the game goes, a lot of damage. 1 damage at a time is really, really big. Um especially against like something like Mage, to where let's say you're still playing your water barrier package. They arcane blast you for a ton. You water barrier. They usually try to eat that with ignite the soul, and this protects you from that.
Yeah, I think it's good. And again, like water is the element that actually got like the most amount of fractals. So like it's definitely the one that leans into the build a fractal heavy board. And if you have like 4 of these on your board, you can you can tap them all and prevent the next 4 damage effectively.
Yeah,
So like
really good against like Korhazi Courier and stuff, to where they won't get that on hit effect. It's really good against on hit effects in general. I think this card's really good. I could see if I'm, this card is a really good argument for like a fractal build and like Water Sander and stuff, where you might want to play 2, 3, 4 of these, and you might want to play 2, 3, 4 of the other one that rips a card.
yeah,
Because I think it's just strong enough of an effect.
agree. And then here's this one, refracting missile. So it is generic floating. It's generic. It's water floating, but it's still like not class bonus.
Yeah,
Deal damage to a unit, so it can target a champion. Amount of fractals you control +1. I mean, like in order to get a ton of value out of this, you have to be playing a lot of fractals. But even if you just have like 2 fractals in play, this is just a 3 cost removal. It's 3 damage to anything, and it's floating, so it's like pretty decent payoff as just like a removal spell. If you're playing a fractal heavy build, you're going to be playing this card. I don't know.
I do want to play a deck with all of the fractals and the one that enables all the elements. I want to play that deck.
Good for you. I hope you have so much fun refracting missile. I mean, what is the maximum damage you can get out of this? How many fractals are there?
There are 3 water ones.
Mm.
There's a neutral one. There's a fire one. So that's 20. I don't think there's a wind one. I thought we were supposed to get one. I don't think there's a wind one.
I
Maybe
don't
we'll
think there's
see
a
it,
wind.
and I just missed it.
No, we
And
went.
then,
I can't remember. Continue.
and then there's Fractalize, which can make you 4 more fractals. So you can deal
Okay.
25 damage with this card.
Okay, so you can't. Okay, all right. Or you could just play 2 of them when you have like 13 fractals and you're still chilling.
Is there a wind fractal? Did we miss it?
I don't think there is.
We already reviewed it. No, I thought we were supposed to get one of each color.
Me no no. I'm going to continue. Riptide
But,
Slash.
but also it's a floating memory. Go
Yes,
on.
it's
Sorry.
slow. Yeah, yeah. Riptide Slash. I like this card a lot actually. I think this card is so this is a 4 of in Mordred. So in the BDIF it's already you're playing for this, so it should probably be an 11 out of 10. Um
Yeah.
but no, I mean I like the effect. I like so on attack glimpse 2, very strong. Glimpsing is a very nice consistency tool. Um Milling 1, and it's a May mill, so like, assuming you're using this to clear any ally, you just get to glimpse 2 and then discard 1, keep the other on top, or move it to the bottom, or do whatever you want with it. It lets you get floating in the grave, it lets you get, whatever else you want in the grave. I think it's a solid card. I like it.
Yeah. I think it's a really nice card. Like it has the ability to, like you said, glimpse too, which is nice. I think with like Water Lorraine, this gets you 3 attack with the Sword of Seeking, which is nice. It's a good number to hit. The on kill effect, it's nice. I think overall this card is nice.
It's nice. Nice. All right, Saga Frost. This card is also very good.
All right, card
So
number 70. Let's go.
card number 70. Yeah, we're getting towards the end here. Um, yeah, this card it's Water Tamer's Cleave Protection. I guess it's not even just Water Tamer. It's attack protection in any water deck because it just ends the combat phase. So you're only really using this against like really powerful attack cards. So like think Rending Flames, think Cleave attacks, think I don't know if someone is infused sword times 3 and they're like I'm swing for 10. You say no, you're not. Um, it's good, and then the class bonus is just like very convenient. Again, you can just pay for it with a floating memory rather than the 2. I mean, 2 cost is already very cheap for this really powerful effect. But being able to pay for it with floating in Water Tamer is good. I think this card is very, very good.
And it's a melody, so it can give you counters with him or with the liar. It's also like against a deck that's not really attacking a lot. The card reads very interesting. If a unit is attacking and the combat step. So if a unit is not attacking, you can still play this card. So you could still play this for a buff counter if you wanted to.
Yeah, true. If you're just using it for the liar, just get a buff
I'm
counter.
fairly certain I'm interpreting that correctly, but I did have a couple drinks tonight and I didn't double check. But I'm fairly certain I'm interpreting that correctly. The if is big.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's actually the same size as the rest of the text on the card, but moving on. Anthem of Vitality. So now we're in the wind card. So if we have a wind fractal, we'll see it now, but I don't think we have one.
You know what? Now that I think about it, I don't think you can play that. But I'll ask Siladar and double check.
Cool. Cool.
This is why we look at rules before we judge.
It's true. All right. Anthem Vitality. So another harmony.
Fix it in post.
I am not editing this. Straight to YouTube, baby. All right. So another harmony. It gives an animal or beast +3 and Spell Shroud, which is really cool, giving it Spell Shroud as protection. And then if you it has Harmonize on it, to put 2 buff counters on it, on just an animal or beast you control. So you can like protect one, buff a different one. This is a good card. It's a really good card for Tamer.
I think this card's really good. I think even without its Harmonize, I think this card would see play.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this card is really good.
Yeah, and I think if like the beast strategies become really playable, this definitely is going to be a card that you play a lot of in that deck. It's really good protection.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Korhazi Outlook. So free prep counter on enter, and then makes your opponents unable to interact with you on your turn.
Very strong.
Counter. Yeah.
Very strong effect. Plays around counter very good. This card is really good against water.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that also you can remove a prep counter, you get a glimpse still, so you still get some value out of it, no matter what.
Yep.
And it does it herself. She's a 1/3. She adds a prep counter. I think this card is fantastic, especially in a water heavy meta.
Mm. Yeah. I think like the potential that your opponent has to play around something like this, right, is that like you activate this ability and then it's like on the stack they can still interact with you. So if they're going to play a card, they can do it then, which is like relevant sometimes. but it specifically helps you play around like the counter spell and stuff like that very well. Um, the the issue just becomes what is the follow up? Does Wind Assassin have good enough follow up to be like, if you can't interact with me, am I getting a lot of value out of my own turn? And that's, that remains to be seen based on like what the rest of the deck looks like. But I think this card in a vacuum is pretty solid. It's just like she doesn't do everything on her own. She needs to be supported. So it sort of depends on what else you got going on. All right, up next, Dematerialize. We got the opposite of Beseech the Winds.
Well,
Yeah, it's so returning a regalia is a very powerful effect. I mean these cards are all once per turn for a reason. Like you only get one a turn because they're all very strong. A lot of times though, I just feel like this is like maybe too expensive and a little bit too slow to play to like get a ton of value, and also a lot of the regalia have on enter effects. So if you're returning them, like you know your opponent might get more value out of them next turn. You could use it to like return your own regalia just so you can use it again.
yeah.
Which is pretty decent. But again, that means you're using another material phase to recast that card. So like I don't know. This card seems like just fine.
Yeah, I think I can just completely agree. Like, I think there's some uses for this where its effect is strong enough and unique enough to have a lot of potential, but I'm not quite sure where this fits. I think this might be a sideboard card because maybe you just want to play this against the Spirit of Majesty,
Yeah.
where
True.
you just put it back into the deck,
Yep.
take your 4 damage, whatever.
Yeah.
But
This is you're out to that card.
also I was right. You can play Song of Frost without an attack.
Oh, did you just message right now? All right.
Yes, I did.
Nice. Very good.
Anything for our viewers.
Cool. All right. Displace. So, it flickers a card, right? Banish it, then you immediately return it to the field, rested. Gives you a light encounter. It lets you dodge like attacks. And
Yeah,
it
it's
lets
kind
you.
of like a reclaim.
Yeah, it's a little bit, and then it also like re-triggers like on enter effects too. Like the thing that I'm thinking of specifically is like Zephyr Assistant. You get her on leave and on enter, like basically twice, and you get an light counter from this. So like if you use this on a Zephyr Assistant, you have the class bonus. It just is 3 enlighten counters, so it's also a draw card. Yeah, I think it's a pretty decent card. It's like just fine.
I would be very curious to see where this fits into Wind Tamer. Because I think the class bonus might be a little bait.
Yeah.
I think this could possibly be really good in Tamer, but I'm not certain it's better than Reclaim. Just because you don't get the floating memory off it. But the ability to blink something like the next card we're about to look at, Green Slime,
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing.
Blink out of the way of an attack, I think are all extremely powerful effects. But I'm not sure it's better than Reclaim. I think it might strictly depend on the build you're playing.
Yeah, I think
it better for you want the floating, or is it better to not have to recast the creature?
Yeah, I think that the second one's the big one too. I think like you're looking at like if I don't want to play that card again next turn to get the effect again, do I just want the second effect immediately? Because like what you're saying with either like Green Slime or Young Beast Bonder is like if this goes in the stack and the other card blinks out and back in, Young Beast Bonder will trigger to give 2 buff counters to a beast. So if you already have like let's say an ordinary bear that's a 4/5 and they're like hitting it for exactly 5 damage, you can blink your Young Beast Bonder and all of a sudden your bear's a 6/8 and it's like haha or 6/7 or whatever it is, right? And you're like haha, I can't do that anymore. So I think this card's gonna heavily depend on like what the on enter and on leave effects are that you have available to you. But if you can blink really powerful effects like that, I think it's a very good card.
Yeah, agree.
And then here we go. Green Slime. Right? On enter, 2 buff counters. On leave, take the buff counters that were on this thing and put them on a different ally. So this is another one, like, the more this card blinks in and out of the field, either with Suppress or either with Displacement or, like, whatever it is, you can very easily get really big, beefy allies with this card.
Yeah, I think the advantage to this card specifically is not that, oh, it's a 2/3 and then you can put it on something else when it leaves. Is your opponent has to play around the counters going somewhere else. So
Mhm.
like if you have a three health ally, they can't just swing at it for 3 because you could blink this and add 2 buff counters to it.
Yep.
So you kind of it's really going to be interesting to see if this deck is actually good enough
Hmm.
and how people will play with it and play around it. Because I think Green Slime specifically is a very important card in this deck.
Yep.
And also, I think Young Beast Bonder. And, the more we talk about it, I think Displace, because you can Young Beast Bonder immediately instead of reclaiming it. I think you'll probably play both cards.
Hmm.
But the on-enter effects of all of these cards are extremely strong.
Yeah. Yeah. You're really looking at like abusing the repeatable effects. So
Yeah.
all right, up next, Innovative Agilities. I think of the D level recover cards, this is the best one. It is cheap. Is a two cost, which is very good. It is fast. You can play it on your opponent's turn, and it gives you either stealth or spell shroud. Like it's protection, it's healing, it's cheap to play, it's fast. I think this is the best of the bunch when it comes to the D level recover.
Yeah, I agree. Something with this, you do have to have 5 counters on you in order to actually get stealth or spell shroud.
Mhm.
Which probably won't come up a lot, but if they're trying to clear your allies, you can't just give them stealth if you haven't taken any damage yet. But the fact that it protects all of your units is
Mhm.
what I think gives this card strength. You're probably going to be playing this, when you're like still level 2 or even level 1 and just trying to protect your go wide minions
Yeah.
or your go wide allies. And I don't know. It's just good. What do you have to say about it?
I think like that's basically covers it. I mean, like it's good. I think stealth and spell shroud are both like powerful effects. Giving them to your whole board is very good. They're limited access effects. Unfortunately, like cleave still goes over stealth, so you can't like fully protect from like a cleave turn from like Lorraine. But I think of the bunch, this is like the one that's going to see the most play. Also, I think like Wind Assassin, Wind Tristan, even like specifically, maybe has a lot of potential as like a sort of mid-rangey control deck, and just giving it access to heals is good. So I think this is just a solid card.
Yeah.
All right, up next we've got Intrepid Spearman. We gave this one a 3 out of 10, but I personally gave it a negative 3 out of 10 from the perspective of a judge, because I know that I'm going to have to disappoint a lot of people with judge calls on this. There was a big debate last week about how many a times a turn this effect could trigger, and the answer is infinite, technically, as long as none of the damage is more than 3.
No, I even did a poll. I actually gave this to 4 people who had never seen this card before, didn't look at GA spoilers, just asked them how they thought it worked. And they all got it wrong.
Yep,
So,
I had a couple people that I showed as well.
especially if you're playing limited at a store where you don't have a judge or someone who's incredibly active on the Discord, I think everybody is going to get this card wrong because I think it is worded extremely poorly, possibly for the sake of being worded extremely poorly. Like, I'm sorry, Sonny. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
this card is going to cause so much confusion, especially if you're pushing a limited format.
Yeah.
I love you. I love you. Please, I love you. But this card is very confusing.
Yeah. And even when it's not confusing, it's also just okay because it dies to creative shock. It dies to.
Really good in?
Mhm.
It's really good in the limited. This card is broken in the limited.
It is, yeah, it is. It's less broken and limited if you play it as it reads, but it is really broken and limited if you play it as it is correctly ruled. So
this might be the best card in limited because they cannot answer this if you play wind.
bro, your board is just like a couple of these guys, maybe some eager pages. You're playing
Yeah,
the You're playing the
Limited,
stealth.
there's not that many things that just deal 4 attack damage.
You're playing the stealth ally that can retaliate other attacks. So even when they attack into this, you're still retaliating for like 8 damage. Oh, it's so good.
If I get 3 of these, I'm not playing a single non-win card in my deck. This card's too good.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But yeah, in constructed, 4 cost for a 2/2 is pretty bad payoff, honestly. The protection effect is like nice when it hits, but you have to be playing like super heavy into wind in order for it to hit every turn, which like you're just not doing unless you're playing like pure wind, because the amount of times like in Lorraine especially, where like half your hand is Crux anyways, you can't just memory wind cards, and if you do just memory wind cards, your opponent's gonna banish them with the trinket.
Damn right they are.
So like, you know, it's fine. It also, like, 2 health is not a lot. It dies to a lot of removal spells. They like all hit at least 2 damage. So at the end of the day, this card's not going to actually see that much competitive play, I don't think. But it is going to be a headache for me specifically, dealing with judge calls.
We're going to try to run a lot of limited at the store. We might do a limited day.
It's true. And we're going to ban this card. Just kidding. Up next, we got Mark of Fervor. Ally Link, +1/+1 Vigor. 2 cost. It's a fine buff. I don't think it's worth 4 spots in the deck ever. And then at that point, I'm like, I don't think it's worth any spots in the deck. Vigor is a really nice keyword. It's really, really nice to have Vigor. Like, even the few games that I have on, like, Wind Sylvie, I love Trained Hawk just because it wakes up. And I'm just like, I can attack and I can retaliate. It's cool. But, like, it's fine. This card's fine.
I think this card has very interesting uses, or will have potential very interesting uses in the future. Waking things up that have like rest effects, where you can use your rest effect and then wake up, and then you use your rest effect and wake up, and you just keep doing that. You're gonna hate me. I think this card is really good and limited. I think this card's like a 10 out of 10 unlimited.
Yeah. I mean, I think like Vigor on its own is a very, very strong keyword in that format. Like, a lot of the damage in limited formats is going to be ally attack damage, and clearing something with this attached to it's gonna be pretty hard. I do really like the thought of the tap effects, and I think stuff like, I mean, maybe this is also a shoe-in for your Wind Assassin, where you're like, I'm gonna tap my brokers like twice a turn to draw 4 cards, as long as you have a lot of prep counters on you.
As long as you have all the prep counters.
Yeah. I could see it. It's decent. It's fine. It's a fine card. Up next we got Parsnips, Royal Maid.
It's really good.
I like this card a lot. This is actually a card that you maybe want to tap and untap over and over again with with Vigor on it.
Yeah, you know, having level 2, you need to be level 2 to get your stuff, which is, I think, a very reasonable effect to have on this. It's unique, so you can't have 2 out, which I think probably makes it where you don't want to play 4 in a deck. But being able to tap and glimpse 1, and you know, that helps you dig for cards, which is really strong in Assassin, and protects allies you have that don't have stealth. I think this card is really, really strong. I'm not 100% sure what allies you want to protect right now. That's the only thing I'm not 100% sure of.
Yeah, I could potentially see it right in Wind Assassin. I think Wind Assassin is like the one deck that gets access to, like, at least the best access to the critical keyword. And I think this is maybe a great way to protect your Bushwhack Bandits, because they do only have one health. They're very easy to kill with just like any random ally attack that goes into them. Tide Diviners, you know, random 1/1s and stuff, just to still kill them. So it could be potentially big in keeping those on the board, because those put a lot of pressure on your opponent to either hit them for really hard damage or force them to discard cards. And if you're discarding cards from their hand and then you're like ripping stuff with Gawain, like, you know, you're kind of chilling. But
the one thing I think this combos really nicely with is Morgan, because she can't take non-attack damage, because that's only a level bonus. That's only +1/+2. So having her not be able just as a bomb, you cannot recover anything, and then Parsnip can keep giving her stealth, I think is really strong. Also, maybe you play her with Blanche, where you just, I have a ton of cards in my memory, and you cannot get rid of her with attacks because she has stealth.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely see this card being very played, especially in Wind Assassin.
I think Blanche is other unit, so that does suck. But you still need to eat it. You can't attack into that, and so some decks might have problems with that. I think you could have some sort of like a unique Super Friends kind of deck where you have her and Blanche and
Yeah, you're just
Morgan.
like protecting each other over and over again, and like that'd be really neat. And then you play Trisket with Fractured Crown, and you have all the unique allies in your grave, and you get +6 health. Now she's slightly better than a spirit. All right. Rally the Peasants. This is a free cast if your opponent has 3 or more allies, so it's not going to be a 3 cast ever, or a free cast ever. And it digs for a human card. You maybe play this if you're like super reliant on Dungeon Guide, to lets you dig for DG. Otherwise, I mean, like, I can also see this if you're playing like the Wind Humans build, right? And you're like, I'm not a level 3 deck, I'm just a Wind Norm deck, and I'm playing Phalanx Captains, Attack Sergeants, Banner Knights, like all of the humans at the same time. You can maybe just use this to dig for your stronger cards.
Maybe.
But that deck is already not like super meta relevant, and so this card is just fine.
Yeah, I just so much hurts this in set 2. I'm not certain what you dig. Maybe you need this to dig for a Blanche. Maybe like the problem is this is also a slow card.
Yep.
Maybe you want this in, like, maybe you play this in Wind Assassin because you have so many human allies, but I don't know. Like, maybe you play 2 of it. I think this is a solid, like, maybe you play it, maybe you don't kind of niche. I don't think this really stands out to me to being exceptional in any deck. But I think it has a home somewhere. But
Sure.
I'm not sure it's super strong.
I mean, I think at the very least, it lets you look at 6 cards and see if there's a Dungeon Guide there, and that might be enough to consider playing like 2 of it. It's like almost 2 extra copies of Dungeon Guide. Not quite the same because you also have Beseech the Winds if you're playing Wind, so you kind of already have eight Dungeon Guides if you want them, but whatever. It's maybe copium. Scatter Essence, we talked about this one last week. Destroy a Fantasia, very niche. If you don't have an out to taunt plus intangible guys, you might play this in your sideboard just to be like, I need to make sure that I can actually kill that combination. Otherwise, I'm locked out of the game forever. So I think this is a sideboard card at best if you specifically need an out into like that combo or like any Fantasia combo.
At least as the format starts, I think this is sideboard all-star. When the meta gets more fleshed out and you kind of idea what you're going against, if you're going against a lot of Fantasia main deck, maybe you play a couple of these main deck. But I think this, as it sits, is a sideboard all-star.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Wind Rider Invoker, again, we talked about this one last week. I just think she doesn't want to be a mage card. But because she is, it's like, it's okay. I mean, again, like we said last week, it lets you cheat a draw for 2 enlightened encounters rather than 3. You can blink it with that one spell, but then she enters restless, so you can't even attack again. You can try to bounce her back to your hand a couple times, get free draws, get extra damage out of her, but like that's just not really the playstyle of that deck, so like it feels a little out of place.
Mm-hmm.
But the card's fine on its own. I think the text is like decent. Shock Therapy, another one we covered last week with the new spoilers. Again, I think this card is like, it's fine. It's potentially an out into Majestic Spirit if you need one as Rai, where you can like peer into mana and then kill Majestic Spirit, so now your Arcane Blast can kill the champion. It's okay.
You can maybe, when you banish this with Reckless, it's not a bad thing. You get an alignment counter, but I think it's fine. I'm not sure what Arcane you replace with it right now.
Exactly, yeah. This one, on the other hand, instant four of.
Oh, if this card wasn't here, I know where shock therapy would go, but this card is insane.
This card is absurd. God, it's so good. Um, it's removal, and then it's like a resource, and it's a level, and it's just so good. You can discard it early off of like creative shocks if you want, and it still gives you value later. Um,
Tide
yeah,
Diviner.
it's
Tide Diviner.
true. Yeah. Yeah, this card is insane. I think this card is very, very good, and keeps Arcane in the question of like a very powerful deck.
Yeah, I think Arcane is still having to change its strategy where you can't go turbo. You have a lot more checks,
Hmm.
a lot more balances. But
Hmm.
I think it's getting strong enough cards to where, with the format going a lot slower, you can kind of play a slower game. You can kind of
Yeah.
enjoy what's going on and still put up a fight.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely see this going in Arcane decks. Maybe again you pivot off like the turbo, like I'm gonna focus heavy on Reckless Conversion, Arcane Disposition combos. And yours like I'm gonna go back to playing some spell shields in the main. I'm gonna go back to playing like I'm gonna do the same thing the other decks are doing. Like if you're playing water, like you're saying with Tide Diviner, you still get your counter spells, you still get your fracturizes, so you can still just be like, I'm gonna kind of like grind you through some resources, and then I'm gonna level to 3, and I'm going to Arcane Blast you twice, and if you don't have an out, you lose.
Yeah.
So it's a good card, very good card. Incarnate Majesty. So the opposite of the opposite piece to Majestic Spirit.
Yeah.
You need this if you want to play that card. They're a combination, so like it has the same rating as that one for that reason. I think yeah, it gets an 8 out of 10 literally just because if your opponent doesn't have an out to Majestic Spirit, they're going to lose to it. So
Yep. Everything we had to say about Majestic Spirit, just copy paste onto this.
yep, woohoo! All right, 86 Slay the King. This card is interesting. We talked about this. Did we talk about this one last week? I don't think we did. I think this was like revealed slightly earlier. So advanced element. So you're not attacking until you're level 3. You're either playing Lorraine or Merlin in this case, and then 2 cost 4 is actually like pretty good. Pretty good like cost per damage output. And you if you use it to remove any ally, you get basically a free card. Not necessarily free, you have to pay for costs, but you still get a bonus materialization, basically, which is really good. I mean, you can use it a lot of times, at least like right now in Crux decks, you don't have like a chance to use GCR because you're just like going too fast. So you could use this to grab a draw in the late game. You could use this to grab like a lantern going into your opponent's turn. You could use this to grab like a Tithe Proclamation going into your opponent's turn. It's just another decent way to cheat out a card from your material deck without needing to spend your material phase on it. So I think it's solid, but the restriction of having to be Crux to play it, there's like so many other really good Crux cards that you want to be playing that I don't know how much it's worth the cost.
Yeah, you have the restriction if you want to be Crux, and your opponent has to have a killable ally in play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a little tough. That's all I'm gonna say about it. I think it's just a little tough.
Yeah. Agree.
Um,
Illuminate.
Something that's like, there's a little trick with this card is you can on attack just like banish a sword or something and get an extra attack if you're Lorraine that gets an attack from that.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never do it. But it's something to keep in mind.
I mean,
that
you
don't
could also
get your own kill.
like you could also do it to cheat extra attacks with Spirit's Blessing, right? Like with a free sword, you use that to kill an ally, and then you use Spirit's Blessing away the sword you just put into play, and now you can get free infusions because you've attacked already, and you didn't have to have an extra sword on board. Like you can combo it with like some of the other Crux cards that way. So I think it's like decent. All right, Illuminate Secrets. So we talked about this one a little bit earlier. I think this card is like pretty decent if you're playing into a fractal build. Influence is just such like an interesting interesting mechanic, especially with like cards like in control. Like you're trying not to let your opponent have a giant hand with a lot of options in it. So like this card is never going to get like a ton of value if you're just trying to play it in like Water Xander. But it does potentially give win cons to other Xander builds. So I think Andy's frozen, so I wonder if he's going to disconnect on me this time. But yeah, so like, you know, this card, if you're playing heavy into fractals, you could potentially get like a big damage swing out of it. And if you're not, you know, it's whatever. I think being a fast damage spell is neat. It's removal if you need it. Otherwise, it's just okay. Uther, Lustrous King. Okay, so this one, very good card. All things considered. It is like he's got so Intercept Vigor, very good combination. He's removal, and he you know, is just 4/4. He's big stats, got intercept. Like he's just like a lot of good things combined together, make him a very very solid solid card. I'm just gonna wrap this out here by myself here. It's been a long time. Avatar guy, we talked about it last week. This card's just fine. Not sure what it goes in yet. And then finally, Crawl, Stone Scale Tyrant. This card is very very good if you can get him into play. I think getting him into play is going to be the hardest part about this card. But if you can manage to do it, is going to be able to like single-handedly end games. This is going to be a similar card to Majestic Spirit, where it's like if they don't have an out, they're going to lose. And so, you know, maybe on that front, he's good enough to warrant just like being a card that you consider sideboarding for. That is the entire set of Fractured Crown. We got through everything. We had one hitch at the end here, which I'm assuming is because my cat did something to my Wi-Fi. So I'm going to deal with that. Thank you all for listening. If you made it this far, we really appreciate your support and your listening. And we will see you next week. Peace.